Today we're talking a little bit about the conflict between story-driven and open-ended gameplay. On one hand, there's a demand for a good story, and then on the other hand, there's another foundational, unchanging reality, which is that the world doesn't really change in most RPGs, especially MMORPGs, because there's only so much change which can be incorporated into a world which is shared by others. It's possible to have story arcs, but nothing that changes the world so much that you can't continue to play in it, nor any changes so great that it would make it impossible for others to exist in the same space while at different stages of the quest line. As an author, the bottom line is that to tell a truly dynamic story, you really need the audience to be consuming your content, not trying to tell their own story. And so there's a conflict of interest between the players of MMOs who want the story to be theirs and the goal of telling a truly epic tale. The two don't mix very well. So there's this conflict between progression and competition. When you consider combat and competitive activities, in competitive games outside the MMO space, there's always one fundamental constant: a fair and equal playing field. Every match starts off with equal balance, guaranteeing that the match will be won on a basis of skill. Good sportsmanship is also encouraged because in most cases your opponent is a person who you will potentially be playing alongside on your team in a future match. In MMOs, progression is a key cornerstone to the experience. If there is no sense of personal achievement, the game feels fake. And so there is a strong desire to create inequality. The new player has to be vastly underleveled, and there must be a promise of eventually becoming strong at endgame. Bosses are easier to beat when met by large groups of players, and people who put in more grind get the bragging rights of being better than other players. But that, in turn, breeds toxicity. And so game developers look for ways to create the perception of progression without actually setting players against each other in a disrespectful way. But that leads to a stale experience where you have to grind to progress, but there isn't really any end game worth grinding for. For example, let's say that you could spend many hours grinding for a legendary weapon, but ultimately it doesn't really give you a very significant advantage. And as far as cosmetics go, you could just pay a little bit of real money in the cash shop and get a skin that would look better. So competition in many MMO environments is basically meaningless, because if you took steps to make it meaningful, that would also put players in a position where they could create a toxic or unbalanced gaming environment. Again, it's an example of a situation where two conflicting genres and premises just don't mesh very well. Next, we're going to talk about the conflict between achievement and creativity. Skyrim might be a beautiful game, but you aren't really creating anything. You're spending time in that game world, but it will ultimately look the same when you're done as it did when you started. And the game will offer the same experience to every other player who experiences it before or after you. There's nothing really original about your experience in Skyrim versus anyone else's. So that means the only real benefit to the game is your opportunity to immerse yourself in good storytelling. But if that's the only goal, then why not choose a more direct medium, like reading a good novel or watching an enthralling film? Would you want to read a good book if you had to walk 5 miles between every page? The truth is, games fill up our time with grinding in an effort to take something simple and drag it out over a long period of time in the name of content. So you read a page of the story and then you have to kill 100 random NPC enemies before you can unlock the next little tidbit of story. Yes, it takes you a long time, but that doesn't mean it's a good time. It doesn't mean it's a better time than if you just had a quality 30-minute episode that was well choreographed and told an excellent story. If you're going to play a game that requires you to engage with it, wouldn't you rather it be a game that lets you truly tell your own story? Wouldn't you rather do something that feels like a form of personal expression instead of consuming a product that is essentially mediocre storytelling delivered in a very inefficient way, which leaves you with nothing to show for it in the end? So what is left? The sandbox experience is what remains. Sandbox games could be city builders, other building simulations like The Sims. They could be MMOs which focus less on story and more on individual agency and player social interactions, or economic simulation, as is the case with a game like Albion Online or EVE Online. These are all things that give you something meaningful in return for your time. You can say, this is what I've done with my time in the game, either measured in friendships that you've created or in interesting things that you have to show off. Now, sandbox games can have some level of story and lore, but the distinction is that it is contextual lore and world building, not so much narrative storytelling. Good lore building allows you to learn interesting things about the world, but it gives you the liberty to interpret them in your own way. When you come away from a gaming experience with a really cool save file and amazing screenshots of things you built, and epic stories of engagements you had with others and friendships you made along the way, that's the best part of gaming. Just being able to say you spent a few hundred hours playing through something and got 100% completion for achievements feels a bit hollow. So in final conclusion, I think the quality of a gaming experience, and maybe other life experiences too, comes down to how much it enables creativity and social connection. Games that rank highly on empowering creativity tend to be amazing experiences, not just when you're having them, but also when you look back on them. And those which bring people together in a memorable way tend to be amazing too. But the experiences which fall in the middle, giving you very little autonomy and also very few positive social experiences, are probably worth trading up from. Spend your time doing things that you can't wait to jump into. Think about those times when you were maybe a teenager, looking forward to playing your favorite game, waiting to get out of school so that you could get home and race to your computer and boot it up and immerse yourself in that amazing adventure. Don't sink your time into things that you have to remind yourself are fun. If you have to remind yourself of why you're playing and repeatedly convince yourself that it's fun even though there's things you're not enjoying, that's probably not really a very good experience. And I think the more we put time into things, the more unwilling we become to acknowledge that some aspects of the experiences we've signed up for just aren't really worth our time. Always try to spend your time doing things you love. And as always, good luck on your adventure. Till next time, thank you for watching.